Let's go to this conversation now. July was a dim month for South Africa. Over 300 people lost their lives during what became known as the July unrest in KwaZulu-Natal and parts of Gauteng. And these provinces experienced incidents of widespread riots as well as looting. Now, a year later, have we done enough as a country to prevent this from happening again? Let's try and see if we can get some of those answers and speak now to Crispin Hemson, who's the director of DUT International Center of Nonviolence. Thank you so much to you this evening. Reflecting back on what we saw unfold in these two provinces last year, would you say the country has done enough to ensure we don't see a repeat of last July?
No. The report by the team led by Sandy Africa said it was simply a matter of when these issues would recur, because none of the underlying factors have been addressed in my view. And it's frustrating. Sometimes I just wish that something would be done, something that actually communicated to people that their plight has been recognized and that there are initiatives in place that will address at least some of the factors that made this possible.
And when you look at that report, as you've alluded to, it talks about, for example, how the arrest of former President Jacob Zuma also became a factor, but it also lays bare the socio-economic issues that need to be addressed as a matter of urgency. And looking at where we are finding ourselves right now, the rising cost of living, we're seeing, of course, the fuel prices increasing. A lot of people are saying they're cash strapped. Would you say it's only a matter of time before we see a repeat?
Yeah, we don't know what form any kind of repeat could take. There's a complex mix of factors, and I think the report was correct in saying that this is multi-causal. It emerges in a particular time, in a particular context, in a particular way. But I was just struck by what we've just been seeing. And some of the same factors in that horrible tragedy at Enyobeni are the factors here. And then the other ones that are different. The other ones around the particular political history of this province. And I think hanging over this, there's a sense of political groupings becoming engaged in and focusing on conflicts, competition for resources. And this is around what Professor van Holt refers to as elite formation. So the attention of people in politics has not been on service to people. It has been on how does one group or another group advance themselves into positions of privilege within the society. That's very damaging. We seem to lack, we are lacking the ethical dimensions of leadership in this. Now, people are sometimes critical of Nelson Mandela, but at least he articulated a vision that was ethically informed. Maybe it wasn't always reflecting reality, but there was somebody speaking to the ethical issues all the time. We've lost Desmond Tutu, another voice of profound ethical concern. This is not a luxury for us to have. These are essential. The economy in our area has been severely impacted through these actions. And if we'd had more ethical leadership, those economic costs would have been so much reduced, in my view.
And when you also look at the report, you talk about, what contributed, as you see, from the lens of ethical leadership. There was also another dimension that the intelligence was found wanting. And we've also seen how bad things are, as in the expert panel report from 2018 and now the state capture report. Would you say this institution is ready to detect any such threats should we see them unfold?
I don't know whether our intelligence services are better. I just don't have very much knowledge about that kind of thing. I'm very worried that we don't see initiatives involving bringing the police into a better relationship with communities, better harmony within the police services. Those things are crucial. When I was reflecting on this yesterday and thinking that if there had been no police at that time in the province, things in some ways would have been better, because people would then have not waited and allowed the situation to go as far as it did. They would have known that they would have had to take responsibility. But people assumed that somehow the police would do something, and of course they did pitifully little.
Pardon me for coming in there.
Yeah, no, Bongi, by all means.
I wanted to also check at the back of that. Let's talk about then the role that was played by social media. I saw an article, for example, in the Daily Maverick, saying that the KZN police chief, for example, was saying that he was proposing a shutting down of social media, during that particular time. On the face of it, some people are saying, of course, this would have been censorship and descending into a dictatorship. I wonder, what are your thoughts on that?
Possibly it was justified if we had done that, because I think that the difficulty that we face is that we have these new technologies, and we have no ways of inducting people into the effective use of them. So people who wish to manipulate, who wish to lie and deceive, do that. At the same time, they could be very powerful vehicles for mobilizing popular opinion in ways which are really productive. So it may be that one would take a more authoritarian stance at a time like that. We actually needed a commander. So one of the rare times that we actually did need a commander, most of the time we don't. But at that time we needed a commander who was able to assert positive and benign authority in that situation. And those forms of authority were sadly lacking.
And when you look at what's happening on the ground, business owners were battling even at that time from the impact of the pandemic, and then the unrest happened. Now the floods, of course, we saw them. Talk to us about the picking up of the pieces on that front. What are you witnessing on the ground?
I think a real deep malaise that affects people in the region, a real sense of hopelessness. Now, maybe this is happening elsewhere in the country, but I'm very aware of how people are feeling deeply disheartened, and it's something that really needs some kind of recognition, acknowledgement of how bad it has been. I had, just after the floods, my electrician managed to come through from Umlazi. Took him about 4 days before he could get out. And he had two messages for me. He said, climate change is real, and they will eat the money for relief. He had two clear convictions. And I think there's a sense of cynicism about politics. We are still, as a province, caught in this pattern of assassinations that now have become commonplace, of councillors, of people jockeying for possession. Some really good people have been killed in that process because they stood in the way of people who wanted access to political power and the resources that come with it. And I don't see any enthusiasm in this region for political parties. I may have missed something, but I know people in various political parties, and they are not talking warmly with much confidence in their own parties.
All right. Pardon me, Mr. Hemson, for coming in there. As you say, of course, it's going to be important for these issues to really be dealt with. Unfortunately, that's all we have time for. Pardon me for interrupting your chain of thoughts there. That was Crispin Hemson, Director of DUT International Centre of Nonviolence.